Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. We are filming this episode on the afternoon of April 22nd when we just wrapped up a webcast on what else but tariffs. And joining me to talk about what's happening are Chris Desmond, a principal in our Customs and International Trade practice, and Michelle Horton, a partner in our Cyber Risk and Regulatory practice. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So, Michelle and Chris, you just got off of this webcast where you spoke about planning, data, and a host of other issues. So, I want to find out from you, how are companies navigating the trade waters right now? Chris?
Well, one great piece of information we have for you as a surprise, Sindhu, is we have an industry analysis that we prepared from PwC that was released this morning just in anticipation of this question. And you ask, well, what is this industry analysis? Well, it is going to be the U.S. tariff industry analysis, what reciprocal and current tariffs mean for U.S. companies. So what we did is we took U.S. Census data, has about 3 trillion of imports, and we then layered in the different tariff amounts that are going on today, because that's what people want to know. What are the tariff rates now? What does that look like? As well as what we might anticipate related to the semiconductor and pharmaceutical industries, and saying, what happens now? And the numbers were even more staggering from our last call, because when we did the analysis, the amounts that we're looking at, they're going to go from about 76 billion a year all the way up to potentially 989 billion a year. That's a 13-fold increase of kind of our current state. That is a lot of tariffs to work with. When we think about average tariff rates, it's like 2.5% in 2024. This analysis under the current state, that's going to jump to nearly 32%.
It's a significant increase. And I know that our clients are really struggling with what to do about it and how to prepare. And that was a lot of what we discussed on the webcast was how to plan, how to think about leveraging information that you have both internally within your organization as well as external data to make decisions and act quickly if needed.
All right. And speaking of that, another piece that struck me was covering due diligence and what that looks like. Can you talk about what due diligence was 6 months ago, what it is today, and what it entails?
Yeah. So one of the points that we talked about in the webcast was M&A and where the market is and whether it's coming back. And we do see M&A activity continuing. We see a bit of a shift in diligence, though. Companies have long done due diligence, financial due diligence, compliance due diligence, tax due diligence. But we're seeing a new layer added for this tariff impact because those tariff amounts can significantly impact the value of an asset. And so really see a lot of companies wanting to take a deeper dive into what is the potential impact of tariffs and what countries are these potential targets operating in.
And then we're being brought in for that reason to say, well, can you run the calculations? Because it's a blind spot in an M&A deal. If a company deals with tangible property imports and exports from the retaliatory perspective, you have to know what that number is, not only today, but what could happen if a deal were to happen going forward. So having those calculations of like after that 90-day pause that might happen, what if the 10% goes to the rates that were announced on April 2nd? You need to have that range and spectrum because that's going to be a real cash flow concern. And finding that number with accurate data for the deal is what is being craved in the market now because you need to have all those factors put in play.
Sure. And the word accurate is sticking out to me. And I want to ask you about data because the word data came up a lot during this webcast. And Michelle, I think it was you who said that the data does not have to be exact. So I'd like you to talk about that because I think this is such a fast moving story, if you will. And there's so many unknowns and unknown in even today. You don't know what's going to happen in an hour or 2 hours. So if you could talk about the data piece, that would be great.
First of all, I'd say, there's a lot of data out there to leverage. We talked about the ACE data, which is the U.S. Customs data that our companies are using to understand the impact of the tariffs. And so leveraging that information is the best source. Chris can speak to that. I would also say that many companies have access to different data sets that can further enrich decision making, and it doesn't have to be to the level of accuracy of financial reporting. It's really about modeling potential moves that you can make and getting enough data and insight to make the right decisions and to think about what options you have. It does not have to be exact. There are third-party data sets that can be leveraged. So we're seeing companies think about how to bring all of that together rather than looking at it in silos.
And when you bring it together, I think, double clicking on the U.S. Customs ACE data, it's an area of a database that contains the company's information that most companies are not using. And why? Well, the U.S. Customs data is typically used for compliance purposes, for customs purposes, not to help the company realize what the potential tariff impact could be through the U.S. Customs data, which the U.S. Customs is going to use if there's going to be an audit for customs purposes. That's their source, and it is your data. And companies do have a responsibility to ensuring that data is accurate. Marrying that data with their ERP data is something that we see as kind of a best practice.
So thank you for that. And at the beginning of this episode, you were talking about different industries, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into that and talk about which sectors or industries have been hit the hardest. So Chris, if you could start with that.
Yeah, well, one of the things I think in the show notes, if you guys wanted to, is to put a copy of the industry analysis we issued today. I think that'd be great because that goes into the details of the double click of the industries. I'll give you a quick summary. When it comes to the industries hardest hit, with the tariffs right now we have in China, it's no surprise that technology, media, and communications